Hi, everyone. Welcome to Basic Binges, part of Nom Talk Network. On this show, we review popular shows that are out while eating and drinking our favorite drinks and snacks. I'm your host, Erric Ramirez, and I am joined by the wonderful Jordyn and Derrick. Derrick, go ahead and introduce yourself today, and what are you drinking and snacking on?
Hey guys, so I'm back. I love the show. It's a lot of fun. Derrick Murray, film critic for nerdbot.com. Great website. You should read all my reviews. They're amazing. I am shameless promo. I know. I am eating a very strange concoction. This is a protein peanut butter pudding that I made myself. So you basically just take some protein powder, mix a little almond milk in there, so it kind of gets a little gooey. Add a little peanut butter, stir it up, throw it in the freezer. Bam, peanut butter protein pudding. Yep,
that does sound really, really good.
So, and then I'm being super healthy and drinking a Rain Energy. So I'm ready. I'm ready.
Balance. And again, welcome back, Jordyn. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
What's going on, everyone? Ladies and gentlemen, everybody in between, elves, dwarves, proudfoots, bigfoots, all that. We love to see you. It's good to see you, Eric. It's good to see you, Derrick. Oh my God, Eric and Derrick. Ha! But I am also being super healthy, and I am having a Cutwater pina colada. They're really good, a little nice and creamy. And I'm just like chomping on some like microwavable ramen because I am hungry and haven't eaten that much today. But I'm so excited for this episode. I'm so excited for this. So let's start with it.
I'm right there with you. I am snacking on Nerds because I haven't had time to stop anywhere today. They're the Nerds clusters, which are delicious. And then always hydrate. And with the week I've had, a mic's hard.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, so today we are talking about Rings of Power episode 3. You're about to continue on this wonderful journey and all the information that they're giving us. So coming back into episode 3, Arondir has been captured by the orcs, and he's in their camp. And when he wakes up, he sees that all the other elves that he was in protecting the Southlands have been captured as well. What were your feelings when you saw him wake up and all the orcs were around and they were so well hidden right underneath their nose for all these years? Go ahead, Jordyn.
So so just in general, and I think we touched base on episode 1 and 2, what I appreciate about this series, I think in general, is it's giving us, the fans that have been Lord of the Rings fans for a long time, the sort of background and the myth that you only hear of whispers, you hear of things going on, especially in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and we're actually getting it in a way where it's palatable for people that want to watch it. So with this episode, when it opened, I was like, oh shit, like what's going on? I have a weird feeling that Arondir is going to become an Uruk-hai, but I don't know. Like, we don't know what's going on. He is sort of, he's a part of, and we see this later on in the episode, he's a part of certain elves that appreciate trees specifically, which if you're watching it on Amazon Prime, which is your only place you can watch it, and you're watching it on your computer, it gives you little trivia snippets while you're watching it in the X-ray, and it's really cool. Like, if you ever check it out, like watch it without it and then watch it again, and then just pull up the trivia snippets, and it'll give you like interesting facts about it. And so I didn't know, but he's a part of it's called the Sylvan elves, but specifically this specific elf like community, or like people that they specifically love trees, which is why that was a main part of like this episode. So when he woke up and I saw him sort of in an orc camp, I was like, oh shit, like something's going on, right? And then you kind of can see how they're not necessarily the orcs that we see in Lord of the Rings, right? Or especially in The Hobbit. They're sort of like a precursor, right? They know that the sun hurts them, but they're not really doing anything. Like they hire humans, elves, like you see people working for them. So I knew something was going downhill real fast when the episode started.
Oh yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I was like, crap, what's going on? Derrick, what did you think when they opened up this third episode?
So yeah, I'm gonna be the lone dissenter, guys, and I am going to admit that the only reason I even watched this episode was because I was going to do this show. I watched the first 2 episodes and it was fine. I don't.
Now you have to keep doing this, so you just watch the whole thing.
I know, right? It's just gonna have me back every week to trash the show. Here's the thing, and this is I have to. It's hard for me to take the episodes individually, just because I am so kind of like not on board with the show. So in the case of this, what's his name?
Aaron Deer.
Aaron Deer. Okay, so in his case, my issue with. My overall issue is that this is only impactful for the people that know what's going on. And by that, I mean, the background trivia, that's all well and fine. I think that's great. I think that's super funny. But the show doesn't function unless you understand all of those things already. So you already have to be incredibly versed in what's going on. So this elf that we just magically met for no reason whatsoever in the last episode, that has like a whole arc in episode 2 that feels like the conclusion of a 6-episode arc. Like when he just like shows up and is like, I've said I love you and all that, or whatever he says, where he's like, I've said it in every way but words, and oh, this is our breakup, but now we're gonna go on another adventure. And you're just like, who the hell are these people? Why do I? What is happening right now? So you fast forward to this episode, and it's
where was the relationship? Where was the relationship?
What is going on? So now he's transported to this orc world, underground, and he's captured. But it's like I don't care. I don't. My issue with this show is it's so beautiful. Like, it's so well shot. The orcs look amazing. Everything that they do under there, all of that. And even when they go up top, everything looks beautiful. But the writing and the narrative structure and the characters are just, I just cannot do it. And I want to be clear. I genuinely enjoy Lord of the Rings. I have read all 3 of them. The only 3 that really matter, I guess. I have read The Hobbit. I am peripherally aware of the things that they're trying to do. But my problem with this, and this episode just kind of doubles down on all of that too, is that sense of, you are making a show that you spent almost $1 billion on making. And you are making it for the 12 people that read the appendix of the Silmarillion. Like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? Like, none of this is interesting to me if I don't know the lore already. Does that make sense?
No, that completely makes sense. Even after last week, getting introduced to the Silmarillion and everything, I had one of my friends who posted on Facebook, was like, I have no idea what's going on. Is there a video? Is there a cartoon? Like, dumb it down for me. So I went on, because Jordyn was like, go on YouTube and look at Silmarillion, like 3-minute video or whatever, and explain everything. Not in detail, but just enough of the gist to understand going further than this.
Yeah.
But I get it. A lot of people are confused and enjoying just the beauty and, I guess, the knowledge of they're imparting, because there is a lot of information they're giving us, and it's only episode 3.
Yeah. And particularly with this is one of those things where this character could be incredibly interesting if he was introduced in the right way, if he was developed in a better way, if they didn't just assume that as soon as you saw his face, you were like, oh, it's that guy. Like, no one is going to do that, man. Like no one is going to, you haven't told us anything about him. So this little tidbit of him loving trees and the possibility of him becoming an Uruk-hai and all of those things, sure, they make sense. But again, they only make sense to the people who have already put the pieces together. And everything in this episode doesn't make it feel like they're going to put it together for me. They just keep moving forward with this assumption that I should know what's happening. And I don't, because I don't care. I know on a surface level, like, I can watch the episode and understand the arc and get the narrative and understand the world we're in. But I mean, on that deeper level of connection, him getting captured and everything that happens to him, I don't care, because I don't care about him.
You're like, okay, bye, next, let's go to Galadriel.
Yeah. Who I also don't care about, even though I know. But anyways, that's another topic. We'll keep going.
Well, actually, having said that, we are moving to Galadriel. We are actually moving to Galadriel and Halbrand. They were in the ocean, and they got picked up by a sailor and taken to a kingdom which Galadriel recognizes, and it is the kingdom of Numenor. So in there, they get introduced to the Queen Regent, Muriel, who very powerful queen, loved her. And she's kind of stunned. You didn't?
No, because she anyway.
We'll get there. 1 second. They meet her.
I'm going to bring Jordyn to the dark side, by the way. He's going to take off those elf ears by the end of this show.
You are pulling him. I see.
I'll put on my longer ones. How about that?
But she's a little standoffish to Galadriel and Halbrand. Like, elves aren't in there. They find out that elves haven't heard anything from this land for decades, centuries. And so this is the first time somebody's been back. They are invited as guests because obviously they don't want a war with the elves. What do you think of like meeting the Queen Regent and seeing this entire land that we're just getting introduced to because it's never been brought up in Lord of the Rings or in The Hobbit before? We'll start with you, Derrick.
Again, and I hate to repeat myself, but most of this is always going to come back to, I would almost feel like this episode would work better and I actually think the series in general, but this episode in particular, because this is an episode where you are already established, right? So you don't get I can give you 1 and 2, right? I can give you episodes 1 and 2 and say, hey, you're just doing your introductions. You're trying to lay the groundwork, whatever. By the time we get into episode 3, things have to start developing in some way, right? In a way that is meaningful, to where we don't need to know the whole story, but we at least need to know where the story is going. And again, instead of just moving forward with a basic trajectory, we take this massive detour. They get picked up and whisked off to another land we've never heard of, but we're all supposed to know exists, and meet a queen we've never heard of that we're all supposed to know exists, and we're all supposed to be curious and into what's happening and wondering who these people are and what their history is. And it's just like, but why? What is the purpose of this constant traversing? Like, it just, I keep thinking that they're going to settle down, right? Because episode 3 is an episode where you should settle down, and they don't. And it's fine if you want to do rapid fire storytelling, right? Yeah. If you want to continue to build blocks, but the picture has to start becoming clear at some point. And by this episode, it should, and it doesn't. And this scene is another representation of that, where we're just given another set of characters in another land that we don't know anything about, but everybody in the show, you even said it. Galadriel knows who she is. Galadriel knows the world. She recognizes it. They all know her. They all have this long-standing, decades, centuries-old history that we're just supposed to know. And we're just supposed to accept. And it's like, but I don't. All right. Talk to me like I haven't read the Silmarillion. Stop it.
So we'll bring you back episode 5 once.
You're right.
Episode 10, when everything finally comes together.
You're like, I love this show. It's great. Episode 10.
All right, Jordyn, what did you think about the Queen Regent and Numenor?
Hated her. Not a fan. And I think it's because, so we kind of see sort of some of the racism within the elves and within humans, within, dwarves, the precursor of the hobbits, all of that in this episode, right? And if there's anything that, especially in the last scene where she is seen talking to this person, right? Like, who's in the bed, who she's like, oh, father, right? Like, so there's something obviously going on in Numenor that people are not privy to. They think it's perfect, all that stuff. And Galadriel knows the history behind this, right? Because she's the main bitch. Like, she knows, like, she's got the history, right? I just can't wait to see her turn into like Kate Blanchett Galadriel, where she's like, oh, I'm going to fuck you up with some magic. Like, right. Like, I was hoping something like that would happen when they were meeting with her, but it didn't. I will say, just to sort of like, to go to Derrick's point, I do agree with you in a sense of like, if you don't know what's going on, like if you don't even know like just a little bit, right? And I will say a lot of this is not covered in the Silmarillion. Like, right. This show was like, the writers, I don't want to say made up, but they made up
No,
right?
but they
Like
did though, because they didn't buy the rights to the Silmarillion. They
No.
bought the rights to some offshoot appendix, and they're literally creating the story out of nothing, and then just building it around these little Easter eggs, which to me, I think just makes it even worse. But
sure, and I mean, I think for me, like when so the Lord of the Rings came out when I was like in high school, right? Like when I was like, it was like that generation. I wanted to see it. I had a best friend who was obsessed with it. I saw each film at least 5 times, like at least in theaters, right? Where it was like the first time you watched it, you didn't know what the fuck was going on. But then by the 5th, you were an expert at it, right? And I think this plays homage to the fact that Tolkien's universe is expansive, right? Like it is huge. Like it would take 5 series of this to like cover just like the simplicities of the Silmarillion, right? Like, and I hated reading the Silmarillion. I didn't understand it. I hated it, which is why I went to YouTube and I wanted a simplistic version, which is why I told Eric, I was like, just do it. I was like, don't read it. I was like, don't fucking do it. Like, just do, you know, so that way you at least understand where like the Balrog come from, right? Like, and why like Gandalf can like defeat and fight them, right? Because they're equal power, even though they don't look, you know, so it's just, it explains a lot, right?
Yeah.
But I think for this instance, I think it's going at a pace where I don't have to rewind the episode for me. I can just be like, oh, this is happening. Great, because it's a land. And to be fair, like the Lord of the Rings during that time, the land is dwindled down to like 3 areas. Like this is like the peak of this civilization, right? Like this is like Mayan civilization at its peak. Like you have all these fucking like places around like Central America, like, you know, Mexico that are just like thriving, right? And then all of a sudden fucking something happens, and then you have maybe 3 places that people are surviving at, which is the Lord of the Rings, right? You have the Shire, you have Mordor, and then you have Gondor, right? Everything, and then you have like sprinkle of elves, right? Like, and then that's it. Here it's like everybody's fucking like thriving, and so I think,
Jordan's just out here disrespecting Rohan, but that's fine. That's fine.
Well,
no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Ride or die. But no, I think you're right. I think in this instance, like if I were to tell a friend or somebody like, hey, watch the Rings of Power first, they'd be like, why the fuck? Like, what did you make me watch? Right. Versus like watching Lord of the Rings, then watching The Hobbit, right? And then watching
can I tell you what I think the secret is? Because I think a lot of people are like, well, the Lord of the Rings, you know, made a lot of assumptions too. And it did. Because if you watch the original series, there's a lot in there that they really do assume, right? They assume that you know about this world, and they do it very well. But one thing that the Lord of the Rings has that Rings of Power doesn't, and that includes this episode, they don't have a Frodo. And I don't mean like the person of Frodo. I mean everything that we experience in the Fellowship of the Ring, especially within that first 45 minutes where they're establishing the world, everything is interpreted through Frodo. We meet Gandalf through Frodo. Bilbo is through Frodo. The adventure, Pippin and Merry and Sam and even the Nazgul, all of them, they are all interpreted through Frodo. So by the time we get to actually creating the Fellowship and we see all these other characters, Frodo is interpreting the dwarf. He's interpreting the elf. So he is us. We're able to interpret all of these things through one central character that is now being exposed to a world that they also didn't know existed. So then by the time you get to the 2 towers and everybody splits off, and now you've got because the 2 towers is about as Rings of Power as you could possibly get, right? Yeah. You have 5 different stories all going on in places like we've never met. Nobody knows who the hell Eowyn is. Like, you know, that's one of those, you got to read to know who the fuck she is. But it's all meaningful because we've been given this chance to interpret all these characters through one central theme and one central person, so that when they all break off, well, I care what happens to Aragorn. I care what happens to Legolas. I care about all these new people that they meet, and they don't have to be together anymore. And my issue with this show and this episode does the same thing, where there's no central person that we actually follow, because as soon as we start getting into Galadriel and her whole story, it fucks off and goes somewhere else. And then we get introduced to another elf, and then it moves over to somewhere else. And you're just like, You just need to settle down and interpret this wild, massive world through someone. It doesn't matter who that person is. It can be a Harfoot for all I care. I don't care who it is, but someone needs to interpret this world for us, because expecting us to just do it on a blank canvas, you're asking too much of an audience. You just are, especially for a massive fantasy world like Rings of Power.
See, and I completely agree with you on that. But I feel like they're trying to do it 4 different ways. They're giving us 4 of the Frodos or the Bilbos to try and branch out as far as they can instead of just being like, let's focus this season on Galadriel and talk about how all this is going and maybe throw in the Harfoots and everything like that. They're trying to make 4 different Frodos, and we're just not buying it. I completely agree with you.
Well, imagine this, though. Imagine if, let's take these first 3 episodes, right? Imagine if Galadriel, everything up until this point, right, going all the way into, what was the land? I told you, I'm going to butcher every single name on here. Numenor, there you go. Imagine if all of episode 1 was her arc up until Numenor. And we get introduced to everything. So Galadriel is interpreting her world. So we establish her world. Mm-hmm. And we meet Aragorn, or whatever his name is. The Black Elf. That's awful, but that's what he is. Aragorn. Right. So we meet him. And that whole episode is his trajectory all the way until he discovers that orcs are still alive. So that way, when you start with episode 3, we already know each of these people in depth, right? It's same story, same everything that's already been exposed to us, right? But now when he wakes up and he's captured by the orcs, it means something because we've spent a whole episode with him uncovering who he is, what he's doing, what's his purpose, how he's interpreting the orcs, how he's interpreting his own situation. So then when you come to this episode, you can play this whole episode out just the way that it is with all of that stuff already established. Because now I care what happens to him. I care what's happening in this foreign land with Galadriel because I spent an hour with her learning everything about her. My issue is it's fine if you want to tell 4 different stories, but telling them all at the same time doesn't allow me to grasp onto any one of those Frodos and let them guide me through the world. I'm not grasping onto Galadriel to teach me about Middle Earth. She's just not doing it because every time I do, she forces her grip off me and I got to go grab onto somebody else.
So I'm going to blow your mind in a way where you're like, shit, I wasn't thinking about that. So I feel like the show is doing this on purpose. And I think it's because every single person that we've been following in this story arc becomes a person who gets a ring of power. Because we know that Galadriel gets a ring of power. We know that Arondir might get a ring of power, right? Because it goes to 3 elves. Or he might become an Uruk-hai. We know that Halbrand might become a ring wraith, right? Like, so it's building up and hobbits don't get one, right? Like, but this is just, so there's also like, right, with this person that fell from the sky, right? I think it's Gandalf. A lot of people don't think it's Gandalf. They think it's somebody else, like a precursor to Gandalf.
I've heard some people say it's actually Sauron.
Yeah. So, but
I've heard that theory.
Yeah. And which I've heard that as well. But I do also think that it also plays homage, especially in Lord of the Rings, when Gandalf says, he says a line where he says, I'm always surprised by the kindness of hobbits or something like that. And I think this is sort of like building up because these are the ancestors to the hobbits, right? Like these are people that are before, right? So I feel like it's doing this on purpose and it could be throwing you for a loop, which I agree. Like if I wasn't a fan and I watched this, I'd be confused as fuck. I'd be like, what the fuck is going on? But knowing that somehow this whole entire series is based around like the Rings of Power, which in the first couple of episodes, you get introduced to Celebrimbor, and I don't know if you watched the previous one where we did our review of it, but if you've ever played Shadow of Mordor, you basically like address the fact that like these rings were made and it's like, you know, golems in it and all that stuff, right? And it's just starting out, right? Like this is what's going to happen. So I do feel like what they're doing is on purpose. It may not make sense to you now, but maybe in like episode 7, 8, or 9, you're gonna
The
be
end
like,
of the show.
"Oh,
That's what we
shit."
said.
Which
You're gonna come back, Cherrick, and we're gonna get your pick.
I really want to know.
But that means you do have to watch the entire series.
I know,
Yeah,
right?
sorry.
Oh, God. I'm gonna watch it just for Jordyn. Just for Jordyn.
You better. I put the hair on. You better.
He's gonna be dressed up as Galadriel the last
Yeah, right.
Yes, just white hair, just everything.
Long white flowing gown, just full Kate Blanchett. I love it. I love it. I love it so much. She's a queen, dude. Do it. Do it.
Getting back into Numenor, we do meet some very interesting characters. You guys have been mentioning The Hobbit, and you guys have been mentioning Lord of the Rings, which these are ancestors. We meet Elendil and Isildur. Obviously,
creamed my pants.
Lots of things happen with these two, but they're not the king and prince and everything that we've known them to be. When you when you met them and you saw that they were a fisherman and one was trained to become a sailor and everything, what did you think, Jordyn? You were super excited about this.
So obviously, right? Like when you listen to or when you read The Lord of the Rings and then you see The Lord of the Rings, you find out that Elrond and Isildur basically fight against these dark forces, and basically Isildur is the one who basically keeps the Ring of Power and corrupts man, right? Like it like just corrupts the land of man and everything. So when you first meet him, and he's this son of this guy who basically like saved Galadriel, like believes in the elves, you can like honestly say that, and can speak Elvish, like you're like, oh, so there's a deeper there's like a deeper background with this guy, right? That we don't get in Lord of the Rings. We don't get in these like precursor films, right? And so when we got introduced to him, I had an inkling when I saw him on the ship, and then when someone went Isildur, I was like, oh my God. It was beautiful. It was amazing. We get to meet his family, and I'm really excited to see sort of like how it plays out, right? Like how his story plays out and how he gets to where, he's gonna get, because again, he basically cuts the ring of Sauron off of him, like the ring of power, and takes it, right?
Pretty much the reason that Bilbo and everybody went on their journey.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just going to be exciting to see how that plays out in this series, right? Which is why I'm like, they're doing all these separate characters for a reason. And I kind of am excited to see where the dad, who's he's a general, or he's something.
Well, he just got promoted to a general.
Yeah, and I'm just excited to see like sort of where that goes, especially with the sister too, just getting admitted.
I'm interested to see where the sister goes, because from what I've been reading, what they created her for this TV show, correct, Jordyn?
They did, yeah.
So I'm interested to see where they take her. Derrick, what do you think about seeing these ones? Because you were.
So I'm gonna change my tune just a little bit. No, this is actually one of the few introductions / subplot storylines that I actually did enjoy. I actually do think the way that Isildur and all of that, the way that whole scene kind of transpires, and what we kind of just the brief amounts that we learn, that to me is probably the most effective introduction of somebody that we should know. If you don't, it's okay. Like it's hard to kind of describe why this is fine. Maybe it's just because I recognize the name more than some of these other ones. But that's not entirely true though, because I recognized most of the names in episode 2, outside of kind of some of the like newer characters. But something about, I don't know, something about the way this was all presented, and the way that they name dropped it, and the way that it was like, anybody predicting that this might be something that we're going to see early. Jordyn leaped up. He got all excited. I did. It was great. But that's the kind of stuff that I think is lacking across the board, because I felt that this whole scene and everything about, I thought it was really, really effective. And I actually genuinely enjoyed this little subplot introduction of Isildur and his family.
Oh yeah, no, I'm excited to see where they go. Well, we know where they go.
Spoiler alert.
just to see their build up in this.
Yeah. It's about the journey, guys. It's about the journey.
Now, Elendil, Isildur's father, does take Galadriel to the tower where all these elfin documents and everything are, so she could figure out what the sigil she's been following all across the land, why she's in Numenor and everything, is. And he's giving her a little bit of backstory and kind of mentions that the king of that area kept this tower safe because he was trusting of elves, but then he was outvoted to say, but the tower still stands. And they find out that the sigil she's looking for is actually a mountain range and what looks to be Mordor. What did you guys think about this, Derek?
I think it was pretty expected. I don't think anybody thought that it was going to be something non-Sauron related in the way that we kind of understand it. I mean, her whole character arc right now is searching for these specific answers. And, you know, they're not going to do a Game of Thrones sigil and not give it meaning like Game of Thrones. But
it's a wolf. And they're like, fuck it. Like, we don't care.
There's the spirals and everything. I was like, I swear to God, if you just abandon this.
I feel like that's going to happen. Though.
I know.
At some point.
Yeah, as predictable as it was, though, I do think that was. I don't know that I necessarily like the narrative construction of it, but I do think, you know, giving us some kind of like, you know, this idea of Mordor and Sauron and all these, everything about that whole darkness be existing long before any of them ever knew that it existed. Like the fact that the sigil is representative of a dark, evil land that none of them even knew. Like this whole land is just being built under a lot like the orcs, right? Evil is just seeping underneath the calm, which I think is a fantastic theme. I don't think it's executed properly in Rings of Power, but I do think it's a really good. I love the idea of evil just kind of brewing underneath the surface, right? And you see that directly with the orcs, who have basically built their world. They built an underworld, right? But then you see it here where, you know, Galadriel, one of the only things that she is really kind of soloed in the series is she knows that it's still there, right? She's the only one that does not trust this piece. And she's right, obviously, like she's right. So the confirmation of it and the reveal of it, while I don't think it shocked me, I was at least glad that they gave it something, right? And they gave it something early. So now whenever we see the sigil, we can at least start drumming up our theories and saying what we think it might be and figuring out how it contributes. And it sounds like it's probably going to have a payoff. So if anything, I'm glad episode 3 decided to give us some kind of payoff or some kind of notion that these things that we're seeing that feel important to Galadriel are going to be important to the overall story.
Yes, no, I completely agree with you. I'm glad they gave us that little tidbit early on instead of being much confused about other things that are going on. Like you've been saying, Jordyn, how did you feel about this tower moment?
I thought it was super. I think this was one of the pivotal moments in this episode, right? Because we all know what's going on. Like we all know that there's some weird, like it's not over. People are like, oh yeah, it's fine. Like we can just live our lives. And Gladriel's like, nah, bitch. Like no, like fucking Tyra Banks is in the corner getting ready to do America's Next Top Model, and you're over here like not like taking this seriously, right? And they're like, no, it's fine, it's fine. And so I think this moment, especially even after, right, when, and I'm pretty sure we'll address this, like when she finds in the Hall of Lore, Halbrand's like family crest, right? Like, and like how that's related and sort of like it proves like some certain things like about him. I feel like this was like, she's like, oh, this is what's happening. This is what's going on. And I was like, hell yeah, like this gives her more credence to go to like the elves and be like, yeah, it's not over, right? Especially like Elrond, who's now in what's considered Moria, right? Like he's there with, you know, and then, you know, we eventually know that they all get together and, you know, they all fight him and try to stop him. I'm still waiting on her to like get her power. Like, I don't know, man. Like it kind of just seems like, yeah, she's this like elf ghost, that like has this like her brother's like knife that like she hasn't used yet, and I'm like, can we come on, like I want to see some like elf girl magic, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
some
and I don't
badassity.
like the warrior take that they're giving to her, where she's like this badass warrior elf. Like to me, like, yes, I know she's a fighter, but she's always being an elf that outlives most generations and most iterations of man. The idea that she was this uncompromising, just violent warrior that takes down snow trolls and like, you know what I mean? Like to me, I was just kind of like, but that's not that's a big leap from where she ends up, right? Like war isn't going to change her into being this ethereal magic boss bitch. Like that's not, if anything, that would tether her to either go off to the never-ending lands or keep being a badass warrior. Like how do you get from the trajectory just doesn't line up for me. So I find in this episode in particular, I found the things that she was doing as far as like tracking down the research and learning about that, I thought that was more in line with who she is and what it is she would be doing. And her being the dissenting opinion among the elves and really going back and being like, look, this is what is happening. I think it would make more sense if she was already kind of the ethereal Galadriel type of queen that we know, versus just having to wait until she becomes that. It just doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't line up for me. So I actually rather enjoyed some of the detective Galadriel, if you will.
Now, mentioning the detective Galadriel and everything like that, do you think all of her research that she was doing in this tower and that she's going to go back to the elves and everything like that and tell them it's coming, we have to fight, do you think this is why she gets her ring of power?
Yes. I think they will all eventually come around and I think her redemption will be that she was right all along, and they are going to mistakenly use the rings as a way to be a defense thing. And because she's been vilified, right? Because she's been validated, she's going to accept the ring because she believes that that's the right thing to do. And then it's going to turn out that, no, that's absolutely the wrong thing to do. Y'all got played. So I think that is probably what is going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Jordyn, do you agree or do you disagree?
So I'm sorry, I'm trying to, I was looking up like who got all of the rings of power for, so they're known as the keepers of the three rings. Sorry, Derek, we're gonna do some spoiler alerts for you. So the
more you know, so you can
I know it'll help me understand episode 4, so it's fine.
So basically, the three keepers of the Elvish rings were Gandalf, Galadriel, and Elrond. So them three got the three Elvish rings of power. And then, as we know, man got 9 of them, and all 9 of them turned into Nazguls or ring wraiths. And the dwarves, I think, how many did the dwarves get? I can't remember.
5.
I think it's 5. Yeah,
dwarves got 5.
It's 3, 5, and 9, right?
Yes,
yeah.
And then basically the one ring was Sauron. So I I think I do have to agree with you. They're doing Galadriel in the way where I'm like, I'm not like go one way or the other, and I'm not saying that she can't be both. That's not what I'm saying at all. But the way that they're portraying it is not effective in a way where I'm believing that it can be both, right? There can be a way that you can do that, right? Where it's like but at this point, I'm like, okay, but the only thing I've seen her do is make something like make a sailboat float that's made out of paper in a river. And then that's the only thing that she's like really done. Like, do you know what I mean? And then you like everything else has been survival, which may be a choice. I don't know. But, I think her investigative qualities and the way that she's doing things for herself and just trying to like get all the information that she can. I'm excited to see what the next episode has to bring for Numenor and for this regent queen who is just stupid and is racist as hell against elves, right? Like,
I mean, mentioning that Numenor is racist as hell against elves, the Southlands are also racist against elves because they don't like them. What do you
Like,
think?
I feel like most people are racist against elves.
I know, they're like, fuck elves. And you're like, what did I do? You know, like they're like, what did I do? I just have pointy ears, man.
It's a weird way to introduce racism into Middle Earth. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't, because this idea that everybody gets along, you know, even in a fantasy world, we know that that's not true, right? But and this show isn't doing it any justice. So I don't. Okay, so fast forward to Lord of the Rings, right? People hate elves because elves basically abandoned them after the war, right? The war happened and the elves were like, deuces, we're going to our own land. We don't give a fuck about you guys. If you all die, we don't care, right? We got our own shit to handle. So I understand the disdain for elves in that regard, because they just basically abandoned man after years of, you know, and they had just reasons for it, whatever. But here, there's no real explanation for why people hate them so much. Because there's no fallout. It's not like, you know, and it's not like they came in. I mean, even when we meet the black elf, and, you know, he gets, you know, that they can't stand him and stuff. It's not like he's ruling the village with an iron fist. Like, he's literally just keeping them safe. He's just a magic bodyguard, and they just despise him for just existing, which obviously isn't that far off from our own world. So I get the mirror, but it's also not justified in any way. It just exists, right? And the racism in Numenor is just kind of like, yeah, these people hate elves, and you're like, okay, great, why? Well, because people of Numenor are racist, and you're like, but what? Why?
Now, do you think that the battle that they had before with Morgoth did this, and because there was definite sides of that, and then all of a sudden people are changing? I mean, with Hallbrand alone, he says that.
We'll never know, because people of Middle Earth decide that watching people fight giant epic war battles against monsters is highly uninteresting, and nobody actually wants to see it. Man, they did that overview in episode 1, and I was like, you're really not going to show this fucking war? What?
Look,
you're not going to show us any of this.
No.
This 15 seconds of you telling me that we had a giant epic battle with Morgoth, and Sauron was the main minion who was like all about it, and all these people fought in it, and you're just going to be like, no. This is you know what we need? We need a sailboat. That's what we need. Hey, Galadriel, make a paper sailboat. That's way more interesting than Morgoth. Like, what?
We need a glowing tree. Fuck your war.
It's just such a weird narrative choice. But so to your point, like, sure, maybe, but we'll never know, because once again, they just decided that wars aren't interesting. And I'm just, but it is, though. But it really is.
I mean, do you think the creators of this maybe think that wars aren't interesting because of the Battle of the Five Armies? I mean, who really enjoyed that movie? I'm attacking him now.
No, you should. You should attack. Throw all of them in the fires of Mordor.
Jordyn, what are your thoughts on this?
Sorry, what was the question? Like, are we talking about Battle of the Five Armies now? Or are we doing the
Well, you can if you want to, but no, we're talking about like the disdain that the elven that the people from there and the Southlands have towards the elves.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just so you know, I think a lot of this was sort of like parallel to like what, you know, J.R.R. was like, you know, sort of trying to like represent. And you know, there's a lot of you know, videos and a lot of fan fiction that, you know, are based around how he was racist and like all this stuff, and like it was just all this stuff. But I do feel like, you know, I think you're right, Derrick, in a way where it's like, even though these people are you know, like the different races, right? Like there's always going to be some type of turmoil, and always going to be some type of you know, we hate this race because of this reason, right? Or, you know, and then even I can't remember if it was in The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings, but basically like elves would cut off their ears because they didn't want to be perceived as like the other, and they would live as, you know, regular men to try to just get by, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's a thing, like, right? Like, can you imagine just taking like a part of yourself and then just like being like, no, like I just want to survive and I just want to like have a good life, and
Yeah.
you know, not have to do that. So I do feel like, you know, it's necessary, because you're right, like even after this war there were some elves that like fought with Morgoth, right? And like that did do all of that. And but I do feel like in this specific episode we see people who, I would say we see men who have lost their way in a way where, and spoiler alert, we know what happens to this island. They basically destroy themselves with their own greed, right? And then they just end up all like just parrot, like, right? And we sort of see that because people forget their way all the time, and I feel like people like Galadriel or people like other individuals that come onto this island or that come into this society, they remind them that like, no, like we still exist, like we're here, and we may be assholes, right? But like at the same time, like we can also be merciful, and we can also like coexist and live together. So I do feel like it's a necessary component to, I would say, the Lord of the Rings, just anything, right? Like, because you always are going to have that, even in video games, right?
Yeah.
Like you have people that just hate elves, and you're like, why? Like, why? And you know, but you know, I do feel like it was necessary in this episode.
I agree that the racism is necessary. I think it's the wrong race. And I've thought that a lot about fantasy in general, because elves are usually the brunt of most of the racism.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
the reason I think it's the wrong race to hate is because elves have everything. Like you can hate them as like being the 1%. Like if you want to hate elves, though, like, you know what I mean? Like if you want to
They got
hate,
a tax break.
right? Exactly. Right. If you want to hate elves because they're basically Elon Musk of the Middle Earth, fine. Like that is a different type of disdain, a different type of standoffishness with them, right? And if any race was going to be that, it would be the elves. They're powerful, they're rich, they're magical, they're, you know, they live for practically ever. They have everything anybody could ever want. So if you want to root it in jealousy and you want to root it in just kind of, you know, social class disparity, okay, fine, right? But the problem with the elves is the elves have never oppressed man in a way that man were slaves in order to come back and, you know, go after their oppressors, but vice versa, right? Elves have never been enslaved by men in order to warrant this kind of racism. And I'm not saying like racism only exists within slavery. Like that's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is that would be a much better justification, right? Like if there was some history where man actually enslaved the elves had an uprising, there was a peace, but people know that history, and so they hate elves because they're basically still slaves in their mind. Doesn't matter how much power they have. It doesn't matter how magical they are. They just hate them because man once ruled over them and now they don't anymore. But that's not what happens. Elves are just powerful beings that show up in Middle Earth, and they're just immediately disliked for having pointy ears. Like that's it. That's the only thing they can't stand. And so it's just like, to me, it's the wrong race. Like I think there are other things that would make more sense to be disdained. Like the dwarves would actually make more sense, and not saying anything about their size or their demeanor or anything like that. But like, these are mountain people. These are people that live in the mountains, in the mines, and they're reclusive, and people can just make up rumors and legends about them so that when you see a dwarf, the man is going to look at them and be like, oh, look at that dirty mine thing. Like, okay, that is the type of racism that I think actually would exist in Middle Earth. So that to me would make more sense. It's hard for me to make this leap, and especially when we get to, you know, Nearmore, where it's just like, why do you hate them so much? Like, they didn't do anything to you. And if they did, tell us. Let us know that, like, they killed your king, or like, you know, they stole your children for adrenochrome. I don't know. But like,
they were like, here, have an entire island.
Yeah, like what? So yeah, I think you're right. I think the racism does have to be in there in some way, because you can't have that many different groups of people and not, you know, you have to have that. I just think it's towards the wrong race for really no reason.
Sure.
No, completely agree with you. Now we are going to get off this racism pocket and
Sorry.
and involved and everything, because we do have another race of people that we do have to talk about, and that is
Yes.
the Harfoots. They are about to go into their migration, which hopefully goes to the Shire. We don't know. We don't know when they got there. But Largo has been hurt, so he is kind of worried that he's going to be left behind. They have this big ceremony where they're talking about all the people who've gotten left behind in the mountains, got attacked by wolves, everything like that. But right before this, Nori steals some star maps to give to this stranger who we believe is Gandalf, because he is looking for this star. And when they're doing the ceremony, he ends up burning stuff down and crashing in and scaring all the Harfoots. And the Brandyfoots get placed at the end of the caravan. So that's going to be even more risk of them. What did you think about all this action sequence that was happening with them? Because they seemed very meek in the world of Middle Earth. Jordyn, go ahead.
So this was I think I'm kind of loving this story arc for multiple reasons, right? I think, Derek, going to your point, I think we sort of see the Frodoian story through Nori in a little bit, where we see somebody who has lived a life of has lived a nomadic life, has lived a life where she has always wanted more, right? Like we see it in episode 1 where she goes to get the berries and then there's wolves there, right? And they could have easily, right? But she's like, we're going to do this. We're like, this is what we're doing. And then all of a sudden a stranger falls from the sky who's magic. And she senses that she has a higher calling. Like there's something greater than that. I think this episode really, I don't know, it was almost emotional when she started to get emotional when the stranger made himself like appear in front of them, and all of a sudden they knew that she knew, and she's like, no, I get that there's these laws, but this guy needed my help, and he clearly is we were meant to find him, right? And then towards the end of the episode, he says friend, and all this stuff, and it sort of leads to Nori's family sort of adopting him, and him helping them carry the cart and everything. I thought it was actually a really beautiful story. I thought it was done in a way where I kind of want to see who this person is, right? And now that you said he might be Sauron, I'm like, shit, right? What's gonna happen? Yeah. But also too, he could be, he could be somebody else. He could, be somebody else that teaches the hobbits how to live and how to settle and do all that stuff. But I do feel like this story was probably one of the most powerful in this episode.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I've had a couple of people, and I don't know what's going on back there, but I've had a couple of different people be like, it just has to be Gandalf because of his love and affection for hobbits. And if these are their precursors, the Harfoot, he does say that they always get into little adventures at the beginning of Lord of the Rings and everything. So it's most likely him. I think you are correct at this point. You have swayed me.
It better be him, otherwise I'm gonna be like, what the fuck?
Derek, what did you think about the Harfoot and
it's funny because the Harfoot storyline has been my least favorite storyline of the entire show so far. But admittedly, I do think that this is one of those times where the split story is actually starting to come together, at least for the Harfoot wise a little bit. I know they're going to connect to the larger story at some point, but they are pretty jarring because they do kind of exist in this weird, and the hobbits always have, but the Harfoots exist in this weird world that no one else knows. Nobody knows that these people exist. They don't know about their troubles, trials, tribulations, whatever. They know nothing. So we're basically going to this land that nobody knows about. So for the first couple of episodes, I was very much I don't like this at all. This I don't like anything about this. But to your point, Jordyn, I do think that there was a little bit more emotional impact in the way that this story unfolded within this third episode, where they actually do become a little bit more interesting to me here. I was very much against the Harfoot storyline for the first two episodes. To me it drags, it's uninteresting, it's disconnected. I don't really care for Nori, and yeah, sure, the Gandalf thing is fine, and it's a little funny when they're playing with the wheel cart and whatever, but I do think that injecting some of that heart and emotion and really kind of not rekindling, but establishing that connection of whoever this person is to Nori in a much more meaningful way. So where now, like you said, the family kind of adopts him now, and he's definitely going to be a part of this story moving forward. So I do think it's probably one of the better executed stories, like subplots of the episode, actually.
Yep, no, I completely agree with you. Touching base on them adopting the stranger or Gandalf or whoever he may be, where we're ending off this episode, because we have touched base at the end. And there is, or the Queen Regent is speaking to what you said earlier, Jordyn, her father, about the elf has arrived in their lands and she is fearful, like how he said. The stranger ends up helping the Brandyfoots with their migration in the wagon, so they have adopted him and he's going with them and gonna probably protect them. Erendare is taken after all of the elves fight to try to get their way out of there, and the captain breaks out and gets shot in the chest, to Adar, which is the name of this episode, and he very much walks up and looks like a human elf. We don't know what he is quite yet. And then Galadriel talks to Halbrand about how he is the king of the Southland people, and that they are going to both come back up from Halbrand's people going with Morgoth in the war, and the elves coming and bringing that war to them, that they're going to bring their people back up and make it right. How do you feel that this episode ended, and where do you want to see it go? We'll start with you on this one, Jordyn.
So I'm excited. I obviously, like, I can't wait for the next episode to come out. And one of my biggest pet peeves is the fact that, like, they don't release this shit like at the same time like they did the Sandman. So I like have to wait, because here's the thing: if I watch like the first episode and the second episode, I'm like, oh, now I have to fucking wait. Like, I just want to binge it. So this is but I think in the next one, I definitely want to see some confirmation. Obviously, we're gonna see who the individual is that is at the very end of the episode. I want to see some confirmation on who Halbrand is, who he eventually becomes, because we sort of see a dark side to him, I think, in this episode, where, he first, we sort of see it when he wants to steal the, smithing sigil from an individual. And then he's like, oh, no, it's fine. Like, I can charm my way out of this. Right. And then we see it when he just like beats the shit out of all of them. Right. And then we're like, fuck, like, what's going on here? And I definitely want to see sort of what Galadriel does with the Queen Regent. Like, immediately my head went to, I hope she just like kills her, and then it just something happened, like anarchy, right? Like Game of Thrones, like freaking blow up in the green fire, like just fucking do it, right? But we won't know. And so I kind of just want to see where the next episode takes them in this island land. So yeah.
Cool. And Derek, after hearing where everybody headed out to, and what are your feelings about this? You're watching it next week. You're coming back.
Are you really?
I don't think I'm on. I think I'm out of town next week. Man. I'm not available. No, part of me just wants to see if they actually do start moving forward with these things, because I think, and even I was listening to you describe kind of what happens in the episode, and I was like thinking back on it, and I was like, man, they really just blow shit up in that final, like the final like 5 minutes. They just fucking just blow it up, and they're just like, absolutely, everybody's going everywhere, let's do it. Yeah. And you're like, yeah, wow, okay, sure. So if I was going to watch the next episode,
you are.
What I would hope is that they do dig through some of that debris a little bit better. and start. I really want them to start defining some of these stories a little bit more. I think adding now that you've done 3 episodes of just absolute bonkers character introduction with little character development, I really would like to see them pull back a little bit. And I don't mean slow down like in pacing wise, because I actually think the show is painfully slow sometimes. But I do think that there are, I think I just want all of these individual stories to be a little bit more defined, right? You're gonna kind of drop a grenade, send everybody to all these different little places. All of them have something special and major that's kind of going on. We're introduced to a whole different, character. We see different sides of some of these people, like you were talking about with the pin and all of that. But I really want them to just start honing in, start drawing lines around some of these stories, so they're not just like all over the place. So if I was going to watch episode 4, that is what I would like to see.
No, I completely agree with you. I think they're starting to. We especially see that in the Harfoots, that it's kind of just like now narrowing the bridges with all of them. I do want to see more direction with this to pull all of that together. And the pacing, again, this episode, I was 40 minutes in and didn't realize I was 40 minutes in. I thought I was still like 20 minutes in because there's just so much. But that is all the time that we have to talk about episode 3 of Rings of Power tonight, guys. Be sure to join our Discord to keep this conversation going. I want to shout out my guests, Jordyn and Derrick. Derrick, go ahead and let the people know where they can find you out there.
Yeah, guys, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at DROK Comedy. That's DROK Comedy. You can find me on Facebook. Just type in my name, Derrick Murray. Everything I have is public, so you guys can check that out. Please check out nerdbot.com. I do reviews all the time. If it's new, I'm probably going to do it. I do tons and tons and tons of reviews, probably too many, honestly, but definitely check it out. New stuff for you guys to check out all the time. It's a great website. I really enjoy it, so check those out.
Perfect. Thank you for being here. And Jordyn, go ahead and introduce yourself and let them know that they can find you again.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, CityStars13. Haven't posted in a while, but keep saying I will. Keep saying I'll freaking post. Please follow these two. Well, you're here and you're here. Oh wait, here. Follow these two wonderful individuals. They're amazing. Derrick does honest reviews, and I will have to say, like just read them, take what you will with it. But he's great. Erric, you're awesome. You're wonderful, amazing. Follow him on social media. But yeah, CityStars13. I post everything nerdy, everything about my life. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you for being here. And then everybody out there, you can listen to the show on Google Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you can get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, our Facebook, our Instagram, TikTok, and Twitch. All of our platforms are at Nom Talk Network. Tune in for our next show, which will be Wednesday, with Jordyn doing episodes of Sandman. Until then, I'm your host, Erric Ramirez. You can find me at Heartless7 on all social media platforms. And until next time, have a nomorific day.
We love you, Steph.